There seems to be a lot of talk going on about Metroid Prime 4 recently. Along with Retro Studios acquiring some new talent for the dev team, Nintendo just released a new trailer for the next installment in the Paper Mario series, and it has a lot of people speculating on what's to come. At the end of the trailer, there's a short scene in which Mario was wearing Samus's helmet, while holding his hand and shooting it around the room like her arm cannon. Its placement alludes to being more than just a reference. Will we get some Metroid news soon? A possible trailer even? Only time will tell. But while we wait, I wanted to talk about how Retro Studios could improve on Prime 4 by taking what made the original Metroid Prime so great and expanding on it. I do want to preface that the suggestions and ideas for this game are strictly my opinions and mine alone. This video will be discussing my ideal Metroid Prime sequel, and the ideas are based on how I interpreted Metroid Prime 1, which to me is the best in the series and the direction that Retro should take when making Prime 4. Retro Studios is currently developing the game and were the original developers of the previous trilogy. The problem is, Retro is a shell of the company that it once was, which isn't me trying to insult them or anything because they still managed to develop some quality games with the Donkey Kong Country Return series, and what sounded like a bunch of ambitious projects that were rumored to have been cancelled as well. But they've actually been losing talent as early as right after the release of Metroid Prime 1. So when it comes to developing the next iteration in the series, there is a chance that they won't know the core elements that came together to make that game as special as it was. To understand what they need to do to recapture what made that game so great and improve upon it, we need to go back. Metroid Prime was released on the Nintendo GameCube in North America on November 17, 2002. The game opens up after Samus identifies one of the space pirate ships in orbit above Talon 4. This opening is a tutorial of sorts, while also setting up the story of how Samus arrives on the planet. It is here where your adventure really begins, but I'm not going to go into too much detail about the story itself just yet. It's the atmosphere and the world I want to discuss. After chasing Meadow Ridley down to the planet, you land on Talon Overworld and exit your ship. Without wasting any time, the game puts you right in the eyes of Samus and you're in control. The area is filled with lush environments, alien-like plants, rushing waterfalls, and trees covering the sky above you. You stare up at the sky, the rain pours onto your visor, and once that sweet music kicked in, you knew you were in for something special. That is the kind of atmosphere I want for the new game. A mix of serenity and danger. There was a feeling of discovery and wonder when traversing the world, and you had the ability to scan pretty much anything, including plants and wildlife. Many of the plants and creatures had descriptions. This gave the world a feel of realism and sense of functioning ecosystem. Some would react to you like blast caps, mushrooms that let out toxic gases if you shot them. Other plants were harmless like tangleweed, which would slow down your movement when walking across it, but if you shot it, they would retract into the ground. They even brought back classic creatures like Zoomers and Gamers, which were proper obstacles in past Metroid games, but instead of just being smaller enemies in Prime, they are creatures living out their life in this world. I'd like Prime 4 to expand on this. They could make a more realistic ecosystem by having the creatures hunt other creatures. Similar to how Monster Hunter Worlds has bigger monsters devour smaller ones if you happen to cause them to run into each other in the world. I'd like to see plants that eat flying creatures like a Venus flytrap does. Samus or other aliens could get caught in the webs of a spider-like creature and have to either destroy the spider or the webs to get free. Things like that could really bring this alien world to life. I also want to see a lot more plant life of different kinds. Some that glow, others that bloom as you get close to them. Think James Cameron's Avatar. Sure, this stuff isn't important in the grand scheme of things, but it feels like a natural progression of what Retro was trying to do with the original Prime game. It also really helps push the player into wanting to explore the world. The more authentic and interesting it feels, the more we want to see what's around each corner. And now I want to talk about the story of the Metroid games. I think they're at their best when they're kept very minimal and have all the lore and story be told mostly by the world itself. Whether it be scanning structures, Chozo artifacts, and letters chiseled into the walls, or maybe even have audio logs that you can find on computers or in corpses and things like that. If there was a civilization on the planet prior to Samus visiting it, they could add structures or ruins similar to Prime 1 and show the remains of what was once there. The visuals should let the player come up with what happened. Aside from lore being written in logs, some stuff should be left vague and up to interpretation. The Metroid Prime series has slowly moved from this to more traditional storytelling throughout the games. Metroid Prime 2 had NPCs, and Prime 3 was fully voice acted with lots of cutscenes and characters to interact with. I think Metroid works best when focused on isolation, so I wouldn't suggest going in that direction of the later games. 1 was perfect in that you were alone on the planet. You had no one else to directly interact with, and you had to explore this planet with no help. As for when the game will probably take place, this is a tricky one. The Metroid Prime games have all been prequels to the mainline 2D games in the series, but I personally think that the series should finally push for making a proper sequel. I'd love to finally see what happens next instead of filler story in between games that can't be too important or break out of continuity. It seems that Nintendo is either afraid or not sure where to take the story after the events of Fusion, the final game in the story chronologically. Prime 4 to take place where the supposed cancelled Metroid Dread or Metroid 5 was planning to. Metroid Prime 3 even hinted at Dread, and it would be neat to connect the two in a way. There was a terminal in the game that if scanned read Experiment Status Report Update, Metroid Project Dread is nearing final stages of completion. There was also another terminal next to it stating it was cancelled. Now both Nintendo and Retro did deny the connection, but it would be a cool idea to connect this to Metroid Dread in some way, even if just a reference. As for the other option, they can continue from where they left off with Metroid Prime Hunters Federation Force. In the secret ending of Metroid Prime 3 that you unlock by getting 100%, you see Samus fly off and being followed by Psylux, a character from the DS game Metroid Prime Hunters. Then in Federation Force's after credit scene, they show someone sneaking around the Federation base in a first-person view. They find a Metroid egg and hatch it. The camera pans back to reveal that it's none other than Psylux himself. It seems like they're hitting towards the next mainline game involving Psylux in some way, and Kensuke Tanabe, Metroid Prime's producer, has once expressed interest in developing a sequel involving Psylux. This definitely interests me as well, so I don't mind what direction they decide to take with the story. Metroid Prime 1 had this art style that was pseudo-realistic and had a slightly stylized look to it, and the sequels that follow seem to lean further into the stylized, which is indicative of the change in design for Samus. In Metroid Prime 1, when Samus removed her helmet at the end of the game, she had a more realistic look to her. Her design in general was perfect. She looks like a tough bounty hunter and fit in the world really well. In the subsequent games, she was switched out for a more cartoony anime look, very similar to the look they gave her in Zero Mission. When it comes to the handheld games, I'm fine with the cartoony look, but all in all, Samus's Prime 1 look is the best so far. I'm usually not too big of an advocate for realistic games in general. I think they age poorly and don't look as great as stylized games do. That's why I think Prime 1 nailed this blend perfectly. It's not about making realistic elements, but elements that are believable. A fan by the username Milky Max made a reimagining of Metroid Prime's Talon Canyon in Unreal Engine 4. Now he hasn't built the whole game and it's just one area, but it's impressive nonetheless. I have never once liked a fan-made game done in Unreal 4. I think they're just overly realistic and soulless looking. But this is the first time I've actually been blown away. He accurately captured how a modern Metroid should look. Also, I know that the Switch isn't exactly a powerhouse, and I get that they won't be able to make it look even close to this. It's just a dream of mine. And if you're interested in seeing the rest of the fan-made Prime footage yourself, I left a link in the video description below. As for the music, there's only one man who can do the job. There is no substitute. Bring back Kenji Yamamoto. His music brought some of the most memorable and catchy atmospheric music in the industry. Lots of modern games replaced catchy and memorable music for forgettable atmospheric sounds. But it doesn't have to be that way, and Kenji Yamamoto has proven that you can still have that eerie, serene, and magical sounding atmospheric music that will be ingrained in your head forever. From that opening title song, which sounds both organic and robotic, it really sounds like some sort of organism is being born somewhere in space. To the relaxing ambient tones of the Talon overworld. And how can you forget the Phendrana Drifts, probably one of the greatest songs in gaming. Even without context, it reminds me of light snowfall in winter. He is an integral part of the Prime franchise and Metroid in general, as he has been composing the music for the series since Super Metroid, and I doubt he'll be replaced. I just need him to return. It's important to me and many others. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now when it comes to gameplay, I don't want too much changed. The first two Metroid Prime games had no second thumbstick for aiming. You used the right bumper to stop and aim around, and when fighting enemies, the right bumper would lock onto them. When locked on, you could then use the jump button while strafing to dodge. This was a great mechanic that offered up different gameplay from traditional FPS games that also pretty much functioned the same since the beginning of time. In Metroid Prime 3, they added the ability to use motion controls to aim, and you could now shoot freely as if it were an FPS game. But it still wasn't a viable way to fight enemies. You still had to use the lock-on and strafe dodge to fight. That's because these games weren't first-person shooters. They were first-person adventures with some shooting involved. Some people think it's a good idea to make the game like a traditional FPS, and I think that would be doing it a disservice. Director of the yet-released Metal Gear Solid movie, Jordan Vogt Roberts, understood this sentiment. In an interview with IGN's Max Scoville, he was also adamant on Nintendo keeping the classic controls with the Metroid Prime trilogy if it were to be released on the Nintendo Switch.
Anyway. Hey, Nintendo, why can't I play Metroid Prime on my Switch?
Look into it, Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo, who's watching this? I know clearly you're watching this. Why can't I play it? And when you do allow it, bring back the lock-on mechanic so I don't have to aim like a first-person shooter. It's a first-person adventure, and I want to play it that way.
I'll leave a link in the description below if you want to see the rest of that interview. I say give the option of aiming with the analog stick to shoot doors, switches, and look around easier when traversing the world. But keep the lock-on function as well as the strafe dodge mechanic. This was always the most fun thing about the shooting, and turning it into another FPS would just make it feel as bland as everything else out there. So now, when it comes to the level design, I hope they keep it as expansive and maze-like as the first two games. Prime 3 went for more of a linear design, and it just didn't feel like Metroid. I need it to feel expansive, yet still have those claustrophobic sections. I'm hoping Retro doesn't forget how integral platforming is in the series as well. I'm actually a huge fan of platforming in first person, and it seems to be unfavorable to most, which I don't understand. But games like Turok, Half-Life 1, and recently Doom Eternal and Ion Fury have lots of segments with platforming in first person. I think it's important to the series, and I hope it makes a prominent return. Another point of contention is the backtracking. I get backtracking can be poorly implemented, and some games add it for padding, one example being Devil May Cry 4, which had terrible backtracking. But backtracking is at the heart of the series, and isn't the negative effect of bad level design as people think. You're exploring a planet. You're not exploring in a straight line. Things are scattered, doors are locked, and sections that you need to progress story-wise aren't going to be chronologically lined up next to each other for convenience. Speaking of convenience, the next thing is fast travel. No, don't do it. Don't want it, don't need it. Everyone wants fast travel in all their games for some reason, and it breaks up any sense of place you have. If you need to add fast travel in your game, then the world you've designed just isn't fun enough to explore and live in. Being on an unknown planet with vast dangers shouldn't be convenient. It should be a hassle. If they really need to rely on this crutch, I hope that there is a hard mode that removes this functionality without damaging the game design that might have been built for fast travel in mind. When forced to backtrack, you start to learn the ins and outs of the world and know where everything is. It starts to feel like a real place. I know I'm coming off a little bit harsh and that a lot of people are going to be very against what I'm saying right now, but I just really can't stand that fast travel is just a thing in everything. And I know you're saying just don't use it. But the problem is that humans, they get enticed very easily. And I admit, whenever there's fast travel, I do get tempted to use it because I'm impatient. People in general are impatient. So I'd like the ability to have a hard mode of some sort, or maybe something to toggle in the menu so that it just removes the feature altogether. I also want to touch on the save system a bit because they need to keep it the same as pretty much all the entries in the franchise. A lot of modern Metroidvanias kind of threw away the save points, and I doubt Retro will, but I feel the need to mention it anyway. I just hope that the save points are few and far between as to feel like there's something on the line to lose if you die. It's integral to the series and gaming in general. I don't want to see checkpoints or any overabundance of saves. Some saves can even be reused as finding shortcuts. Just make sure to limit the amount that exist. Another change I doubt we're going to see in the series but has me worried is objective markers. The original Prime games had a hint system that you could turn off, but even when on was really limited. It barely told you what you had to do to get to your next destination or how to get there. I'm all for that. As players exploring the world, we need to get lost a little and figure our way out of a situation. I just don't want to see any objective markers of any kind. Maybe have a hint system you can toggle on in the menu like the previous games. Once again, at least add a classic or hard mode that plays like a proper Metroid game. I'm not saying that I want the game to be hardcore, but expect us to try a little without having an in-game strategy guide. Exploration games shouldn't feel obvious. Exploring is the foundation of most games, and the unknown is the core of exploration. Metroid Prime 4 needs to be the big step forward for the Switch that it was for the GameCube. Not just another half-assed attempt like Luigi's Mansion 3, Star Fox Zero, Kirby Star Allies, and Yoshi's Crafted World, among other games. They aren't bad games at all, but they just seem like bland, okay games at best. They're very easily forgettable, and they play it safe. Too safe. A type of game that Nintendo's been making a lot of recently. The Metroid series is really important to me and a lot of others out there. It just doesn't sell as well as the other franchises that Nintendo owns. And if this fails, we might never see a game in the series for a long time. That means that this game's going to need to entice a lot of new players, and they're going to have to figure out a way to grab their attention. One way should be to release the Metroid Prime trilogy on Switch. I'm sure it would do well, as a 3-in-1 game would be a great deal for many, as well as there not being many games like it on the console. I just hope Retro Studios knows what they're doing. It seems like Nintendo really cares about getting the game right, as they scrapped the entire game and started again. I have little faith, but I still can't help but be worried. The game's development was restarted like a year and a half ago. That means we have like 2.5 years at the very least. So until then, all we can do is wait and hope things run smoothly. For Samus's sake. Alright guys, that's going to do it for the video today. Before I go, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the video. Did I miss anything? Do you agree at all? What is your ideal Metroid Prime 4? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, and if you liked what you watched and want to see more, hit that little subscribe button down below.